Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in and checking out our podcast today, Maker Connect. My name is Matt Despins, and I'll be your host for the show. With me today, we have Mr. Matt Geddie, who is not only a true negotiation tactician, an architect in its highest form, but also happens to be one of the two founding members of our firm. We wanted to break the mold a little bit today, and I'm going to put him on the spot with a couple of questions. With that being said, Matt, since you don't need any introduction as the co-founder here of the Maker Group, let me dive into our first question, if that's okay with you.
That sounds great, Matt. Looking forward to it.
All right, cool. So the one thing we try to do here on this show, as you know, Matt, but I'm going to say it for our listeners, is we try really hard to keep acronyms and buzzwords to a minimum. We just like to keep it fun, relaxed, and casual. Is that good for you?
Sounds great.
All right, cool. So, Matt, if of course you and I know each other, but the listeners don't. So if you're open to it, I'd love to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your career and your background so the listeners can get just a flavor of your negotiation experience. Also, at what point in your career did you discover the importance of negotiations and start to actually take it seriously? Don't be shy about bragging a little bit about your career and accomplishments. You've earned it, and our listeners want to hear it.
Awesome. That's a great question, Matt. So, some of my career, I'd say serial entrepreneur. I used to call myself an opportunity addict. If you would look through how many LLCs I have under my name, I think there was 21. Most of those have been tremendous failures. We were fortunate to have a few successes. It's really just about identifying opportunities. Obviously, we've been at the Maker Group now for 3-4 years, building the business, working with incredible people like yourself. Prior to that, was at another negotiation consulting firm called the Gap Partnership. Learned a ton, really, really well-run business, just phenomenal group of individuals over there. And then prior to that, had a couple of different semi-successful wins. Started a manufacturing business in Vietnam.
Okay.
And 2010, where we again manufactured coconut oil of all things, caught the coconut oil craze from 2010 to 2016, sourcing goods, manufacturing. And it was in that moment that I realized how critical negotiation was. As the business scaled, as the business grew, we were an Inc. 5000 company for 3 of the 5 years, growing about 100% to 300% a year, scaling quickly, got up to about 47 people in the business. And I remember one particular instance, we were sitting down with a much larger organization and they wanted to acquire us. And I remember in that moment, very senior skilled CEO, he sits there and we were in a big company, but we were doing a little over 5 million in revenue. And he looks and he goes, well, would you take $1 million for your business? And what I realized what he was doing is he was anchoring and seeing my reaction. Obviously much younger at the time, inexperienced in business. And I didn't walk and storm out the door like I should have. And so my reaction to, obviously we weren't going to take that deal, but I didn't freak out like I should have with this anchor offer. And when they came back, they offered us a deal that was pretty suboptimal to base off our revenue, our potential. We had a couple of manufacturing facilities in Vietnam, and it really just showcased that everybody all the time, especially very senior experienced business individuals, are constantly negotiating. So
Sure.
in 2016, we sold that business to a private equity firm. And then we started another company called Kia, which was a personal moisturizer, feminine healthcare organization focused on kind of organic skincare products. And so we sold that business through Walmart, CVS, international distribution in 22 countries. And then we were fortunate to sell that business towards the end of 2021 to a large global multinational pharmaceutical company. So a lot of failures, a lot of successes, but kind of through and all, I just remember that one moment we were sitting at the table with our CEO. And I was like, oh, I have no idea how to negotiate with guys. And so with that said, after we sold Kia, working with the Gap Partnership really just taught me a whole lot about negotiation and been able to kind of leverage some things we've learned, but in some new, really innovative ways and collaborative ways using data with the Maker Group.
Well, so you're bringing here at the Maker Group, you're bringing in not just negotiation expertise, but you're pulling from so many different kinds of experiences from different industries and different personalities. And to cut your teeth so young in such an important moment, I mean, as you sit here today, there must be a really big library of all things negotiation in your repertoire. I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah. And it's not even, not even around negotiation, just business in general, right? I'm a big
Yep.
believer that no failure, no experience is ever wasted. So even
Mm.
the worst deals you've ever made, the worst things that's ever happened in terms of just, terrible partners or investors and all these things that we've gone through, everything is a learning opportunity. And I think when it comes to growing and founding a business and just business in general, it's about just taking those mistakes. Nothing's a big deal, right? Nothing that we're doing is going to absolutely destroy. And it's just about having a tenacious attitude, growing and stepping forward. And now with our business, obviously we're professional negotiators. We coach and partner with our clients in a really sophisticated way. And it's really just reminding them that negotiation comes down to a process. Negotiation comes down to preparation. Negotiation comes down to planning, and being as detail oriented as possible, and understanding, hey, we're negotiating with other people too. And other people have their own perspectives, identities, problems in the past, things that they come forth to that table. And how do we understand that? How do you partner? How do you build collaboration? And then, how do you get to a deal that benefits everybody, that people want to continue to partner and move forth?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways for me there was that there is no such thing as failure, right? Every time you have an outcome that is suboptimal, that's just a learning opportunity. So I really appreciate that. And by the way, for the listeners, imagine getting the opportunity to have your boss on your podcast and learn things about him you didn't even know. I had no idea there were like 20 something companies. So Matt, that's really incredible. And everyone who's listening can tell why I chose to work here with this gentleman. Such an incredible depth of knowledge. So thank you for that, Matt.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Hands Hand Cream? No, you haven't. Why? Because it didn't go anywhere.
Maybe the next one. So Matt, I want to talk a minute about negotiations as either or both in art and a science. Which side of that school of thought do you feel is a little more aligned with? Is it more of an art, or do you think it's more of a science?
It's an art because you have to. The science comes from the psychology of how we all interact, right? Everybody has a tendency of how they're going to move forth. We've studied that. They've done a lot of studies in the brain in terms of understanding human behavior around negotiation. So that's the science piece. But art overwhelms it because I can have a clear understanding, but if I don't have the skill set, the comfort, the ability to apply that science in a way that benefits me, benefits my company, benefits my other partner that we're negotiating with, then it all falls flat, right? Like I can be the best read negotiation expert. I can understand all the psychological aspects, but if I'm not comfortable doing something with that in terms of that art piece, that's where that comes in. And that's where most people fall short. And so, there's a lot of science behind it, but the science is only as good as if you actually can apply it. And that's kind of where we step in and help our clients, is actually apply the arts aspect and making sure they're comfortable doing things differently, making sure they're driving that internal alignment, making sure they're driving process. Otherwise, it all just falls flat and you're just kind of stuck sub-optimizing value, leaving money on the table, or ruining relationships because you're not negotiating in the best way possible.
Is it fair to say that, so if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like maybe those are a pretty good split. Maybe it's, equal parts both, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, no, equal parts both. You got to understand the science, but if you can't apply the science, if you can't be an artist with it, then you're not going anywhere.
What it reminds me of a little bit is kind of a football team in a way, in the sense of sometimes one part gets all of the attention, the quarterback.
Yep.
But if the quarterback doesn't have linemen to block him, or doesn't have a defense to stop the other team, it doesn't matter. So it sounds like here, in your opinion, the art and the science are actually working together, and you can't be successful without both.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. You can have a coach that calls the best play in the world, but the team can't execute it, then it's not going to go anywhere. So it's kind of that hand in hand approach when it comes to negotiation and being successful, both personally and professionally.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's kind of how I feel about it too. But as we heard in the beginning, what I think means nothing compared to you. So,
yourself too short, Matt. Would not cut yourself too short.
Yeah. So listen, movies are famous for portraying negotiations with fist pounding and intense facial expressions and yelling with emotions and manipulations and other general shenanigans. What do you think the biggest differences between real life negotiations and maybe the ones that we see in the movies?
Yeah, phenomenal question. I think it's the human element of what's next or what happens after, right? In the movie, you're not seeing the fallout from a super aggressive tactic. You're not seeing the ramifications of not taking the right approach to how you're conducting that negotiation. And so in real life, right, you've got that other party, you've got that relationship that's going to be compounding over time. And so those are those biggest differences. And I think also movies portray negotiations, yeah, is hard-nosed, sophisticated. A lot of that is negotiations, I think, in the 80s, 90s. Now, especially with younger generations kind of stepping into the corporate world, there's a lot more focus on collaboration. There's a lot more focus on, hey, how do we make this a win-win where both parties are getting what they need out of it? Obviously, someone's always going to be winning more, but it's really focusing on how do you collaborate? How do you create value together? Because especially in the professional world, right? There's buckets of money everywhere,
Mhm.
but people's lack of driving that art of effective questioning, the art of understanding what's necessary for us, what's understanding what's necessary for both parties, it just leaves a lot of value on the table. And so when people take such a myopic approach of, oh, negotiation is just a hard line, banging your hand on the chest, on the table, or pounding your chest,
Either way.
you're destroying value. And
Yeah.
that's really what it comes down to. And that's what we help coach our clients to overcome is let's really understand the perspective of the other party. Let's understand what we're trying to get. Let's have the confidence to go get it. But understand, hey, the other team's got to win too. So what does that look like?
Well, you just touched on something I think really important that maybe a lot of people who are newer to negotiations or have been doing it the other way for a long time might miss. And that's that in a great negotiation, you do have an eye on and some kind of motivation for the other party to win too. Tell us a little bit more about that, Matt. Like, in what way does the other party having success lead to a better overall experience?
So in the professional negotiation world, what you always have to recognize is the other party has a boss. They have KPIs, key performance indicators. They have things that they have to hit to get their bonus. And so understanding that you have to give, quote unquote, what we call a pound of flesh to the other party in every single negotiation is absolutely critical, because you have to think about what is their victory speech when they go back to their office and to their boss to say, hey, just negotiated with Despins at the Maker Group. This is what I got. Right. And if you can give them what they got, if you can give them that victory speech, makes them look like a rock star, makes them look great internally, makes their job more secure, makes them make much more money. And so they're going to want to negotiate with you over and over and over again, but you've set it up in a way where you've gotten exactly what you needed. You've maximized your value, but you've planned it so they have that victory speech, which is really, really powerful. And we oftentimes forget that, right? We always come in thinking, hey, what do I need? We work with a lot of consumer packaged good companies.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have these 120-page decks that they're trying to fly through with their retail customers. Just, this is what we're doing. This is what you're doing. This is what we have to do. And it's like, okay, why don't you just take the time to understand what's important to your customer? Why don't you take the time to understand, hey, what are you actually trying to drive here? And once I understand that, then I can actually craft a negotiation where both parties are going away with a high level of satisfaction.
In some of our negotiation trainings that we do, either for individual corporations or many corporations mixed in all in one group, we have that full training program and different approaches that we take depending on what type of relationship we want with the other party, right? Can you tell us just a little bit about the approaches where maybe one, we might be a little bit more interested in the long term versus one that's a bit more transactional?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of a key concept of negotiation is understanding that different types of negotiations require different types of strategies. So for us, we really challenge our clients to think about, hey, what's that? Where's the trust within the relationship, within the other party? And then how complex of a relationship do we have? How complex of a negotiation is this? And depending on those two metrics, right, there's a wide array, it's a little subjective, but it gives us an inkling of, hey, do I want to approach this in a more strategic way? Or do I want to approach this in a more transactional way? And then based off that, just simple separation of what we're actually trying to do, it allows us to be much more strategic with planning and preparation and basically and how we're going to behave and how we're going to take the approach.
And so some of those training classes that we do, where did the concept come from there? For instance, I know that we typically have 8 people in a training class where we talk about this. I guess, can you chat a little bit about where the first off, the concept for the training class came from, and then how we dialed into it, 8 being the right number versus it being 20 or 2.
Well, I mean, actually, we'll do it for 8, we'll do it for 20, we'll do it for 2. We'll do it for whatever the client needs. And that's really, we lean into flexibility. I mean, we have a phenomenal team, from our consultants to our operations team, to our sales team, to our podcast host. We have a ton of experience. And what we've done is we've listened to clients, right? We've listened, watched, and observed how has negotiation shifted even from the pandemic to now, or even pre-pandemic. And so we watch what's happening in the marketplace, and then we create trainings that are relevant and timely to what people are facing right now, because the world is constantly shifting. The world is constantly changing, depending on whether it's an inflationary environment, deflationary environment, it's sales, it's procurement, supply chain, marketing, finance. It's really taking a look to say, what skills do people need now? And then our trainings are customized and our deliveries are customized to what people need now that's going to make that impact. And that's really what sets us apart, I think, from just kind of any competition in the negotiation space. And there's a lot of great negotiation training companies out there. But what we do is we make sure everything we're doing is relevant and timely to where people are at today and where their leadership is trying to get them over the next 3 to 5 years. And that's what our trainings do.
Well, I can say firsthand to the listeners, before I took my job here in sales with the Maker Group, they made me go through that training. And I thought, geez, it was virtual. So I thought, geez, 4 days virtual, that's a long time. But I left that and I said, wow, like what an absolutely incredible training. So the forethought that everybody before me put into that is incredible. So definitely an incredible use of time there for that training. So Matt, a little bit of a sensitive topic in the world in general, but obviously there's a ton of conversation out there right now about AI and how it will affect different industries. Some of the ones that I hear coming up the most, that I hear, HR, legal, insurance, accounting, and obviously there's thousands of others. But what are your thoughts on AI in negotiations? And I want to add to that, I'd like to talk about it in 2 areas. Number one, if you feel that it is ethical or not for people to be using it. And second, do you think it's worthwhile? So first would be, is it ethical or some variation thereof? Do you think it's an unfair advantage? And also, do you think it is in fact useful or just more of a waste of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not the expert in ethics of AI. We'll leave that to the AI executive team. But again, I think when it comes down to business, is this tool allowing me to be more efficient with my time? Is it helping my people be more effective? Is it driving more value for our organization? I think AI checks all those boxes. Obviously, there's a lot of room to go. When it comes to negotiation, I see a world where really simple negotiations are just done via AI, right? You've got your customer, your supplier, that's just kind of funneling through AI. Absolutely. But when it comes to more complex, I think you can utilize AI to parse through data to help you with effective storytelling. But at the end of the day, that art piece, I think is still, I mean, who knows? I used to say AI is 5 years out. That was 6 months ago. So
Sure.
It's coming, but I think AI covers the science piece, the human elements where that art piece comes in. And obviously we talked about, you need both.
Fair enough. And so it sounds like you do see, even with the most powerful AI programs, you do see for sure a need in order to have AI there as well. Is that right? Excuse me, you're always going to see the need for art in addition to a strong AI program.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right? Business is human, right? Business is focused, and yeah, it's just what you need to do.
Okay. So I want to dive here a little bit, and not because it's one of the tools that we have developed here at the Maker Group, but because it truly is an industry first, talking about our negotiation management system, Maker Connect. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that? I mean, feel free to be as descriptive as you want. And again, not because it's a sales pitch, but because this literally is a game changer in the world of negotiation. So straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, Matt, love to hear you talk about how it was developed, what this is, what his intentions are, and kind of like why so many people are using it.
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate now. I think we've got over 6,500 users on the platform, which is
Wow.
massive, right? I mean, we launched the MVP last September, and we're always iterating. And so the fact that we've got such great traction, and what it comes down to, it just helps people plan and prepare, right? It helps people drive a process. It helps us stay disciplined within how we want to negotiate. And I mean, we've got the data to back it up, but the more detailed and the more planned people are in their negotiations, the more successful they are. And so before that, it was always done in Excel or just these rudimentary tools that never brought it all together. And so what our negotiation management system, Maker Connect, negotiation planning tool, we got a lot of different names for it. It just brings together a unified internal alignment strategy. It allows us to look and say, hey, how was last year's negotiation versus this year's negotiation? Obviously, we're incorporating AI into that. And so the system's then telling you and prompting you how you should be conducting this negotiation based off the type and the power scores and the metrics. And so it also is a phenomenal leadership tool, right? It's leaders lack the ability to drive transparent understanding of their team's negotiations. And so when teams start to utilize our process and they start to utilize our software, what happens is now we're able to make actual data-driven decisions based off our team's negotiations. We've had a client that we're working with, and they came back and they're like, it's taking us like 6 months to close our big deals. And they're like, yeah, we didn't know it took us so long across over 75% of our contracts to get these things done in 6 months. And so that also then gives us insights. Okay, well, how do we speed up our negotiations, right? What skills and how do we support our people to make sure we're negotiating in a much more effective and time-bound type of way? Because time is money in the corporate world. And so, yeah, I mean, the planning tool, obviously a lot more iterations to come and a lot of cool features that we're adding in, but at the core of it, it drives a discipline that most organizations lack within the process of how they negotiate. And we've got some really exciting things coming down the pike in terms of incorporating real live data streams that helps them identify, hey, what are the risks? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? And then that allows us to then prompts us to understand, hey, these are things we should be negotiating. These are the approaches should be taken. These are who we should be wiring with across the other customer. On top of their insights. How should I be approaching this person? How should I be talking to them? And so the whole system is just a unified platform to drive the most effective negotiations possible. And when done effectively, it drives an immense amount of value for our clients.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Are you saying that Maker Connect is better than these sticky notes that I have right here? Is it so I shouldn't have these plastered everywhere talking about my negotiations from a year ago? That's not how I should do it?
Nothing is better than sticky notes.
Sticky notes and a whiteboard. Sticky notes and a whiteboard. But
sticky notes and a whiteboard. That is, I mean, again, but the amount of companies, these billion-dollar organizations that are run off of sticky notes and Excel, it's incredible. But how do we become more refined? How do we get more experience? How do we drive best in class? Right. And it's again, we work with a lot of different clients, and we look at some and they say, hey, there's a discipline there, there's a structure there. There's other ones that, they're still in the sticky note whiteboard days. And it's our job to partner with them to kind of show them the benefits of saying, hey, embedding a true process across your clientele is going to help a lot if you can do it that way.
Yeah, because I mean, with the Maker Connect, I mean, not only is it so powerful for planning a negotiation and then executing it, but also in the retention and analyzing of that data. I mean, you go to a lot of CROs and you ask them and you say, hey, listen, your last 5 biggest deals, who was involved? Who did you negotiate with? What did you negotiate? What was your escalation strategy? You ask them all these questions and a lot of them go, I don't know. Right.
Great
so,
question.
Yep. So even besides all of the things that it does for pre-planning and execution, not to mention things streaming in, AI, some of these upcoming parts, it's also such an amazing repository like a CRM to go in there and go, oh yeah, we told that person this, or we already negotiated with this escalation strategy and it wasn't good. Am I understanding it right?
No, absolutely. And I mean, let's just take consumer packaged goods. I mean, most organizations, there are like 4 to 5 different types of negotiations we constantly find ourselves in, right? Pricing, SKU harmonization, line reviews, maybe you're responding to a customer ask. And what happens is people are creatures of habit. And so we can start to mirror and track that habit. Then we're going to understand how the other party is going to respond. But usually that information is just all over the place, right? It's in the sticky notes, it's on the whiteboard, it's in somebody's head. But unfortunately, that person leaves, right? Or they take their sticky notes, or the sticky notes lose the stickiness and they fall on the floor and then they vacuum up. And so what our system does is it just drives all a really robust knowledge repository that is lacking from just these large enterprises today, which helps them drive an immense amount of value.
Yeah, that was such a powerful part of it for me, before we go to the next topic. But when I came here and seeing that there's this place where you can just go and find all of your negotiations and all the details, every single one, all of them in one place, and learn how to plan and execute, that was like mind blowing to me. So I found that to be really good. And how many users did you say so far? 65,000?
6,500.
6,500. Okay. So 6,500 people so far, and it's
5,000, but currently 6,500.
and how long has it been deployed for?
So I think we rolled it out September 2022.
Okay. So that's less than a year. Great. Okay. So you've been super generous with your time today. I have one more question for you before we go. So out of the many, many data points, strategies, calculations, considerations, and preparations, if you had to pick only one, just one, what would you say is the most important thing for someone in a negotiation to remember and think about? So I'm in a negotiation, I'm already in it. We started communicating with the other parties. Yes, there's so much to factor in, the things that the Maker Group helped guide you with. But what would you say is really number one, the top?
It's it's understanding that the other party has to have a victory speech.
Okay.
Right. And through that, you're going to drive understanding of what they care about. You're going to precondition what you care about, but it's really understanding of when they go back and they go talk to their boss, what are they telling their boss about how this negotiation just went? And if they go back and say, hey, we just got absolutely crushed, well, then that party's going to come back and try to crush you back, right? Relationships are going to tear down. But if they go back and say, hey, this is a great partner, both got what we wanted, but I've set it up in a way where obviously we've maximized our value, and you can do that if you're planned and prepared, then that is the key thing we have to focus on. And then I would say just on top of that too, is being comfortable doing things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk a lot about just how do you understand conflict and fairness and all these things in negotiation. But what it comes down to is just me being comfortable doing something differently, because everything that we talk about, it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple, right? Negotiation is not rocket science. It is a very, very simple, basic blocking and tackling, but it just requires people to do something different. And if they do it, then they have a massive, massive amount of success. And so that's where that human element comes in, and that artistic piece that we talked about way in the beginning comes in as well.
Yeah, I mean that resonates with somebody like myself who prior to getting involved, so to speak, in the world of negotiations with the Maker Group, was just a normal kind of negotiator. But it speaks to me that would be the most important thing, because a lot of the folks that anyone is negotiating with, a lot of times they do have a desire for continued negotiations with them, right? I mean, these are long-term partnerships most of the time that we're trying to foster and create that trust, right?
Yep. No, absolutely.
Okay.
And that's, and again, Matt, one day we'll have to interview you to hear about all of the your police officer stories in terms of negotiating with. I can only imagine the breadth and scope of the people you got to negotiate with.
Those negotiations typically take on a different tone than the one that we're going to be training people to use. But but at the end of the day, you do, to look at the synergy there, you do want buy-in on that. And I'll just close it up by saying that, one of the things that we did talk about in my previous life, and a lot of police officers will tell you, is that you've done well when you basically can get the person to put the handcuffs on themselves, meaning that you've explained it to them in a way, you've created that synergy and partnership where there's no conflict anymore. They're just kind of seeing like, okay, this is the thing that needs to happen. Let me help you with it, right? And so in negotiations in your world and now our world, we want people to have that alignment, and so that they can give us what we need and still feel like they're doing the right thing for themselves.
Yep. 100%.
Am I spot on there?
You're 100% spot on.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that wraps up our time for today. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to do it. For me, super informative. Even after being here, the amount of time I have, I still learned a lot about, things today, just me. And I listen to it every day. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, Matt. Yeah, keep it the great work. Podcast is sounding absolutely fantastic. And our guests are just absolute rock stars, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, we're totally blown away by that. I can't believe the lineup that we have coming. I'm very, very blessed and feel very fortunate to have them. And so for everybody listening to keep that in mind. Over the coming weeks and months, we have some people that you wouldn't believe who are going to be joining us. So for sure, stay tuned. So thanks again, Matt. We appreciate it.